Real estate terms you should know whether buying or selling your next home. What is an appraisal? That is the bank's way of knowing what the value of the home is. What an appraisal is they send somebody out, his certified appraiser, they go out and they look at the value of the home. They look at comparable homes that have sold, they look at market conditions, and they basically produce a value of the home. So this way the bank is confident in the money that they're lending their buyer that the home is actually worth that. Should the buyer default, the bank will be able to take the property back and resell it and not resell it at a loss. What is a home inspection? A home inspection is an inspection that is done after you go under contract to determine any deficiencies with the home. The inspector's out there to look at anything to do with the roof, the HVAC, the electrical, the plumbing, to make sure that all of these things are in working order. So, they're gonna run your faucet and look underneath the sink to make sure that drain line isn't dripping water. They're gonna make sure that the hot and cold handles are actually the hot turns on the hot water and the cold turns on the cold water. And all these things are used when you're determining what you're gonna ask for in your repair request. What does WDO mean? WDO stands for wood destroying organisms, otherwise known as termites. So when you have a home get a WDO inspection, that inspector is coming out to look for any termite infestation or any wood rot. And this is where people get confused. Wood rot could be from water decay, right? Because they're looking for that decay in the wood from water because that is what attracts termites. So WDO stands for wood destroying organisms. What is the VA loan limit? The current VA loan limit is $647,200. And what that means is the VA is willing to give you up to that amount when it comes to loaning you money on a home, right? As long as you qualify, as long as your debt to income ratio meets their standards. Another thing you should know when you have VA home eligibility is if your wife is also in the military, you both have VA loan eligibility. So great example is you come into an area, you buy a home underneath your eligibility, then when you get orders and you PCS to another location, take that property, turn it into a rental property, and when you move into your next location, use your wife's eligibility, right? And then now you can actually build wealth using the VA loan. Here are a few benefits of a VA loan. 0 down payment, no PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. You have a better interest rate. The only downside is you're going to have to pay what they call a VA funding fee. And that's basically a fee that the VA charges for being able to give you all the other perks of the loan, and that is tacked on the end of the loan. So if you qualify for, let's say, $250,000 and your loan's for $250,000, your actual loan amount is going to be $260,000 if that funding fee was $10,000. Another thing you should know about your closing date is let's say you buy your new home on, let's say, the 15th of the month. Your first payment is not due for the first full month after the month you close. So if you closed on a house on January 15th, your first payment's not going to be due till March 1st. But that doesn't mean the bank isn't getting paid. What they actually do is on part of your closing costs is they actually collect all the prepaid interest for that next month. Down payment. It is usually recommended you put 20% as your down payment in order to get the best rate and the best terms possible. But that doesn't mean you can't buy a home if you don't have 20%. There's other options out there that you can put as low as 3 to 3.5% down when you're purchasing your next home. One of the things you need to think about when you're purchasing your next home is your closing costs. So if you're buying a home, typical buyer closing costs run about 3% of the purchase price. So, if you're buying a house that's $250,000, you're going to need to have roughly $7,500 set aside to cover your closing costs. Is that math right?
Yeah.
1% is 2,500, so 2,500 times 3 is 7,500. I'm so quick.
That's what she said.
And if you're a seller, your closing costs are going to run around 8 to 10% of the purchase price. Now, what that's going to include is the realtor commission, doc stamps on the deed, and title, and all the other things that are associated with closing that property. If you're a seller selling your home and you go and you get multiple offers on your property, the highest offer price is not always the best for you. You need to think about all the terms of the contract. What are the repair limits? Is the buyer asking for closing costs? What's the closing date? If it's closing, 4 months from now, guess what? You're gonna have 4 more monthly mortgage payments between now and then, right? So there's all these different factors that go into a multiple offer situation, or any offer for that matter. But if you're comparing apples to apples, the highest price is not always going to win when you look at all the additional terms and the other things associated with that offer. The Florida contract consists of 3 different repair categories when an offer is submitted. One is warrantable items, right? And the way the contract's written, it defaults to 1.5% of the sale price for warrantable items, 1.5% for WDO items, and 1.5% for any open permits. And if you really think about it, like on a $300,000 house, that leaves that potential seller on the hook for over 12 grand in potential repairs. So if you want to write the best offer possible, you can limit that number. We typically like to bring that down to a more manageable number, and you can actually lump all 3 categories together and say, hey, we'll set aside $3,000 towards all warrantable, all WDO, and all permits. And that makes it a more manageable number for that seller, and it basically gives you a better chance of getting your offer accepted.
So you're saying $3,000 for each repair limit, or for all of it?
No, like that. It says there's 3 things, and for the warrantable items, which is anything to do with the roof, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, you have 1.5% of the sale price. So, for example, $300,000 house, you're talking about $4,500 to repair any of those items. Then WDO, when it comes to the WDO inspection, you get another $4,500. So now you're at what, 9 grand? Now you get another $4,500 for any open permits. So now you're talking $13,500 in repairs. Like, so when a listing agent is putting a net sheet together, I'm showing my client worst case scenario here. So you're better off to just lump those 3 repair allowances together and just ask for $1 amount, so that way that money can encompass all of the repairs. So how we write it is, a seller to contribute $5,000 towards any warrantable, WDO, or open permits. And so that number is more manageable. And guess what? If the money's not used, then actually it goes towards the seller's net, which again makes it a better offer from the buyer. What does selling your home as is mean? Selling your home as is means you're not going to make any repairs, right? So if you go to show a property and it says as is, you better make sure you're telling your buyer up front that, hey, we're going to go through this house, but the seller's not going to make any repairs, right? So they need to know that information up front so they don't go and walk and fall in love with the property, and then you go to tell them, oh, by the way, it's as is and the seller's not going to do anything. It puts a lot of fear in buyers' minds that they think like the seller's hiding something when they see an as is property. But one of the big secrets, don't tell anybody. Even on an as is contract, you can actually ask for repairs. That's something a lot of new agents don't know. So after you have your home inspection and you get it back, typically no repair request is sent in to the seller because it's as is. But guess what? On an as is contract, you have the right to cancel. So if you decide that there's something majorly done, like you can't do it on something very small and trivial because that's just not good business. But if there's something major that's really gonna keep your buyer from moving forward on a property, put that repair request in, submit it over to the seller. They don't have to do it by the terms of the contract, but now that you've notified them about the issue, guess what? They've got to disclose it for the next buyer should you cancel and go back on the market. So you kind of have the upper hand a little bit when it comes to sellers that are selling as is, if a major issue comes up. What is EMD? EMD is your earnest money deposit. That is the deposit that you make after going under contract to show your good faith effort that you're going to move forward towards closing on a property. When is EMD returned? Right? Well, sometimes contracts don't go all the way through to the end. If it's written on an as-is contract, you have the right to inspect the property and the right to cancel after that inspection, okay? So if you were to write on an as-is contract, and let's say something major comes back and you don't want to buy the house anymore, you will be returned your earnest money deposit because you wrote it on an as-is contract. Now, if you're on a standard contract and you have a repair limit, now you kind of are tied into that contract. You're in there a little bit deeper than you would be on an as-is contract, but at the same time, the sellers are more likely to take a standard contract versus an as-is contract because they know the buyer's intent is higher, right? When I'm representing my clients on the selling side, or I'm sorry, on the listing side, I don't like as-is contracts because to me that gives a back door for that buyer to walk away at any time. They don't even have to have an inspection. They can cancel for whatever reason they want. So I like the buyers to be on our standard contracts because they have more skin in the game, right? And then another way that the buyer can get their EMD back is if they don't qualify for financing. Okay, so if they don't qualify, if there's some issue with financing within the financing period, and they're able to not qualify for the loan, they're able to receive their earnest money deposit back.